She had the car accident. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. She flipped her car. I got a phone call from the friend of hers saying that telling me what had happened in the car accident, and told me I needed to get to the hospital because she had drugs in her purse, and he was afraid that she was going to go to jail. I rushed to the hospital. I got there so fast that I beat the ambulance, and I got the drugs out of her purse, saved her from going to jail. When they got her there, I noticed that she had a real big lump behind her head, or behind her ear. She had a lot of road rash. There was a little bit of blood, and she was very irate. And the hospital was just kind of tired of dealing with her. And when the toxicology report came back, she tested positive for every drug you could imagine. Everything from cocaine to Xanax to methadone to Oxycontin. I can't really think of a drug she didn't test positive for on that test. And I ended up taking her home that day. And I remember that ride home, I told her, I said, you know, you scared me. I love you. And I never told my sister I loved her. And that day, I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I did. And I thank God for that today. I thank God that I was able to tell her that. Because when I got her home, she went to sleep for 16 hours. When she woke up, she had sobered up. We couldn't figure out why. I knew there was something strange, but nobody would really listen to me because she was always messed up like that. And I cleaned her up. I gave her a cigarette. She went back to sleep. When I came up to her room to check on her again, I turned the light on and she looked at me. She gave me this look that I thought was the meanest look that she'd ever given me. I thought she was going to come up out of that bed swinging. So I flipped the light off. And I stood there and I was staring through the dark at her. And I said, man, her lips look blue. And her boyfriend made an excuse that she had fallen asleep on newspapers playing video games. So I took it as that and said, let her sleep it off. I went home. That was 11 o'clock. At 4 o'clock that morning, 2 detectives knocked on my door. I started up the steps, and my mom opened up the door, and I heard the detective say, or I heard Mom say, is it Sam? And the detective said yes. And then Mom said, is she dead? And the detective said, yes, ma'am, she is. And I remember my ears ringing. I remember everything just kind of went blurry, which now I know it was tears. And all they could get out of me was, oh my God, her lips were blue. And from that moment on, I felt like I had a big hole. I walked around with a rock in my stomach. And for days and it was before the funeral, I just kind of walked around like a zombie. I was carrying around the guilt of, why didn't I call somebody? Why didn't I do something? You know, would she still be here if I would have called an ambulance when I said her lips were blue? And I couldn't deal with it anymore. And the day of her funeral, I looked at a friend of mine who I knew used Oxycontin, and I said, I don't want to feel this anymore. I just want to be numb. He says, I got a solution for you. And that was the first time I did an Oxy, and I went straight to IV drug use. I didn't start snorting. I went straight for the needle because I didn't care if I lived or died anymore. She was everything to me at that point. And she was my best friend. I buried my sister and my best friend in the same day. And I didn't know how to cope. So I just didn't. I just numbed it, and I stayed blank. And I did that for 9 years. I just kept going, and I never grieved. I never allowed myself to feel it. And yeah, it was my excuse to use. And I held on to that guilt as a crutch. Well, poor me. Well, my addiction was kind of spiraling out of control. And my parents decided to press charges on me for conning them out of money. And it was the best thing they could have ever done for me. They had already lost one daughter. was just broken and didn't know what else to do. And so they pressed charges on me, and I was looking at a lot of felony counts, but because it was against my parents, they agreed to drop it down to a misdemeanor and put me on probation. And that didn't really stop me to start with. I did go to treatment, and it wasn't enough to say you're going to go to jail. I actually had to go to jail, and I spent 2 months in Sauter County Jail, and that was enough for me.